All right.
All right.
And tonight our guest is Charmaine McGuffey, Sheriff Hamilton County. Welcome, Charmaine, and take
Thank
it
you.
away.
I appreciate it. And thank you all for jumping on. And thanks for your support, of course. And, a recap of my first term, there's a lot. The highlights are that we've did so much restoration in the jail and we're still working on it, but we have all of the floors done as far as, the 5, 4, 3, 2. We've got a few more things to do, but the locks, the windows. I mean, the fact that it's a clean and safe place to be is very important for the employees and for people who are incarcerated and have to live there. We tore out the showers and oh my God, the place was horrifically bad. So I've improved the food. I increased the contract and the amount of money that we pay to have food brought in and so on and so forth, which I've gotten some pretty good feedback from that from the guys and women that live there. And ABLE training is going really well. That's our de-escalation training and our accountability training basically. And we have updates. We did an initial 8-hour training and we have updates of 2 hours every, to re-up every year. So we're putting all of our employees through that. We've had significant decreases in use of force findings. It isn't as though we don't have use of forces because we do. But, what we want to be very careful of is that they're not excessive and that they are not caused by us, and that they don't result in a tremendous amount of injury because they got out of hand. So we are doing very well on that front. Community Affairs continues to deliver food and answer phones and do the things that are outreach to the community. And we have Task Force for Gun Violence Prevention, DV, Domestic Violence Task Force, and Organized Crime Task Force. And the task force are doing very well. And it's really just a model of, having the meeting, same time, same place, you know, at the same, on a Tuesday, etc., so people can find us and they get used to coming to it and they know they can pop in, pop out. We've gotten a lot done in those arenas, especially domestic violence. Wow. I have Judge Flotman there. Thank God she got elected. I'm telling you, I don't know what we would do without her, honestly. She has done a tremendous amount of work, 30% more, a 30% increase in women who stick with their charges and don't drop them, because now they're being treated properly and appropriately. And, a lot of times there were women that just dropped it because they just couldn't, the system was failing them. So it's really great. Also, immigration, we'll talk about that. I'm sure you'll have questions about that. I have not changed my stance. And I can talk about that as we move along. Request state legislators to make it illegal is what I'm doing. Requesting that state legislation makes it illegal to open carry a firearm and wear a mask. And I am not going to let that go. And if there are guys up there that don't vote for it, I'm going to name them. I'm going to call it out because, man, I'm really mad about what they've done with guns in our arena. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable the position that they are putting the police in, much less, the other killings and shootings and kids getting shot and all of that. So, it's also very important. And then also, I have a plan for the next 4 years to increase mental health services, build out our drone technology and our intelligence unit. And, we have a focus on de escalation and community safety in Lincoln Heights. Because, as you know, Lincoln Heights has been in the news quite a bit lately. The Nazis, just ridiculous men, just it really just turns my stomach that those men even exist in that, arena. And, just because the law, ties our hands on what we can do about it doesn't make it, okay in any realm or reason. And then also, um, we have been doing very well with hiring deputies. So our staffing levels are up and we're very excited about that. So there you go. That is our first year recap.
Excuse me,
Um,
could someone needs to mute themselves? There's some noise. There you go. All right.
okay. So,
That's
Oh,
Jane.
Jane?
Jane,
Maybe.
yeah, yeah, I don't see her muted. But at any rate, those are, those are the things that we're doing, and I'll be happy to take
Okay.
questions and answer
She
anything.
muted.
There we go. Um, I'm going to ask the first question, Charmaine. I've
Mhm.
been thinking about it for a while. That when you first started, and I'm not sure they would have used this language back then, but
Mhm.
as I recall, you were trying to implement what today we would use the term maybe some DEI programs in your department in terms of hiring, things like that. And maybe in other ways, I don't know.
Mhm.
And I imagine there would have been resistance to that, possibly within a department, possibly with some judges, what have you. I'm wondering if you're getting any pushback today. Has that changed in terms of implementation, or if you have a DEI program,
No,
and where is it coming from?
well, and we've never had a DEI program. We've
Okay.
never, under my watch, we've never needed one. And I'll tell you why. Because I hire and recruit people of all, from all spectrums of life. And those are people who are white, black, Hispanic. We want the best candidate. And the best
Mhm.
candidate for us actually is someone who's diverse, right? Of
Mhm.
course, there are white people that we hire, but when I talk about diversity, realize that the majority of people that we incarcerate are diverse. The majority, the majority of
Mhm.
people are black men, or there's some other ethnic, situation going on. And, when we hire, I want to hire as many people as can really relate to those people as I can. And, we don't count numbers. I've never said, well, how many black people are we hiring? How many, I know Simon Lee's did. I know back in that day, that is exactly what would happen. And then they'd get to a certain number and they'd say, okay, that's enough for black people. That's enough for women. We are, we are a employer who is really just looking for the absolute best candidate. And, we have criteria that is a very different situation than most businesses and so forth. I mean, we're running FBI backgrounds, we're scrutinizing drug use, any drug use, we're putting you through a lie detector test. We're going through, I mean, we're combing through your background and who you are and so forth, because we have to have that person for law
Mhm.
enforcement. So that's my take on our hiring. And we are hiring very, very diverse people. I tell you, the last academy, I was up there talking to him, our jail academy, and Mary Carroll remarked when we left, which I hadn't even noticed. She said, I think the majority of that academy is black. I said, yeah, it's great. It's really great. So
Mhm.
so that's our situation.
Well, it's good to hear that you're not getting pushback on that, and
Mm-mm.
you can hire the people that it's. If there's any department in our government, I think law enforcement is one where you have to take a stance like that. That's great.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Doing
And
that.
we're
And
doing very
there,
well.
you totally diversified your command staff.
Well, yes, and thanks
You
for
really
reminding me of
did.
that, because the command staff for many years, up until I was elected, in fact, all those years, decades, was all white men sitting at that table. There were no women. I was the only woman that sat at that table, um, as a command person. No black people, no women, no black women. And now we have Democrats, we have Republicans, we have women, we have men. We're very diversified. So,
Mhm.
you know, so it's working out.
Well, good.
I do have a question if I may.
Go ahead.
Mhm.
Regarding hiring, do you go, I've heard a little bit about the 30 by 30 program, meaning
Oh.
2030, that
Mhm.
30% of the force will be female. Do
Right.
you follow that or working toward that in particular?
You know, I don't really I'm not placing a 30 by 30 on that number. If there are women, and we're recruiting women as heavily as we can to come into this business. And you know, the trends that have been there for decades is, you know, when you're running a jail and a road patrol, etc., the majority of your applicants are men. They just are, you know. Now we do, when we have women apply, I mean, we do everything we can to support them. When we want to bring them on, and we want to support them, and that's what I've done, and nobody else has done that. I can tell you that right now. You know, I make sure that we are doing intentional diversity, and I make sure that the women that we bring on are supported. When I have a sexual harassment complaint, when I have men acting badly towards women, or or I'm keeping my eye on when there are promotions and things like that that go on. I want women involved in that. You know, I want them to get a very fair shake, and I want to promote women. You know, we've been doing a lot of stuff surrounding that to support women.
And why do you want to promote them? Just curious if there are any particular
Well, I want to
positive effects.
Well, and here, let me start with historically. You know, I worked for Simon Lease for 26 years, and I worked in some very key areas, mainly recruiting, training, etc. And I can absolutely tell you without a doubt, that administration actively sought to get rid of Black people, Black officers, Black women, to not promote Black people. Okay. You'd get, you know, one or two, very rarely, and you'd have one or two Black women or Black men promoted. And there was so little opportunity for Black people in this department, and women, that the numbers dwindled. And I'll just tell you, when I first started and Simon Lease took over, I mean, I'd already been there a couple of years. We had some 30 Black supervisors who were captains, lieutenants, sergeants. We had, you know, we had people that had a great deal of influence, 30 of them. By the time he left office, we had 5. So it just, you know, proves my point. So what I'm doing is, yeah, I'm trying to backfill what was done historically, really badly to our department, depleted all of the diversity that they could. So yeah, I'm working to catch up on that. That's why.
Right. Good.
Yes, Greg.
Hey, thanks for coming and speaking
Sure.
to us. And just to give everybody else some background, we actually invited Sheriff McGuffey to come back in January, and she was a little busy. She had a national, I think, sheriff's conference, and then we invited her to come in February, and you had a state sheriff's conference.
Yeah.
And the reason that we were inviting you in the very beginning was because of the agenda that we were hearing from the current administration about immigrants.
Sure.
So I'm just wondering if anything, you said you weren't going to change anything. And I've been hearing rumblings that the state wants to pass something that if ICE comes in, that it's legislated that you have to help them. Like, so 2 questions. One, is that true? Are you hearing that? And then 2, was there anything that came up at these conferences regarding changes in immigration policy that you're going to have to integrate into the department?
Well, I was at there's a major county sheriffs, they bump together. Major county sheriffs are sheriffs that run departments that are 400,000 or more. And many of those sheriffs that come to that conference are in the West, right? California, Texas, all those, really populated big states. And then there is the National Sheriff's Conference, and they butted together, and I stayed up there for both of them to make sure that I understood exactly what was going on in both arenas. And the newly appointed drug czar, did come and talk to us. And, you know, uh, he's talking at a pretty high level. And really, I questioned him, and I said, look, um, you're going to bring these people in, you want to bring them into our jails, and we don't have the funding to support that. And we don't have, our officers are too busy. We're not going to be out there helping, ICE and so forth. We've got our own things to do. And, the other part was, what are you going to do with criminals who, and in fact, that's what, I'm okay. And I said that I'm okay with incarcerating criminals. If somebody's broken the law, bring them in. And I asked him about raids and so forth, other places. And he said, we will not be raiding schools or churches. That's what he said then. Now, I don't know what's going to go on in the future with him, but the way that he sold it to us, not that I bought it, but was, we're going to incarcerate all these gangs and these criminals that are out here. And I said, I'm good with that. Let's do that, But I can tell you there are a number of sheriffs. The sheriffs, and many of them are Republicans, and the large county sheriffs, they're like, listen, we don't want to get involved in this. We don't want to be incarcerating these people who ICE is coming to get and flood them into our jails and stuff. There's lawsuit issues. If we get sued for something, nobody is going to come to our rescue, and we're not going to we're not going to participate in that. And there's a number of sheriffs that said that. Now, there's a number of other sheriffs that are there who are, rah, rah, let's go, I'll get on my horse and help out. So in my estimation, it's kind of split, really, as to who's 100% backing them. And I'll tell you, Richard Jones, who you guys are very familiar with, he, started up his federal prison, his federal jail now, to take, ICE inmates. But honestly, I have to tell you, for what I'm seeing in our jail in our region, is we're just not seeing that volume. We're not. And I think that the focus on criminal activity is appropriate. I do. But we were told, no, we're not going to go in and get women and children out of churches and schools, etc. So they did say, however, if we go pick up a criminal, that and whoever's with that criminal living in that space with that person is gonna, and they're undocumented, they're going to, whether they committed a crime or not. That is one thing that he made very clear to us. And my stance hasn't changed, and I made my stance known at the sheriff's conference, and everybody knows where I stand on that.
Have you had to take someone in who's just undocumented? No.
Yeah, and so I'd like to explain this. So, I was drawn into a task force. I created a task force for organized crime. If you'll remember recently, there were Chilean gangs and Venezuelans that were going and robbing high-end houses. And, they hit Joe Burrow's house and so forth. They're very sophisticated. They're very criminal. And I brought the task force together and said, wait a minute, guys, because they arrested a few of them, and then they got out on bond. And of course, I won't name what village he's from, but one of the sheriffs who was impacted by this wrote this big letter to the prosecutor's office and said, oh, Charmaine let him out. See, she just wants to she let him out. They're criminals. We caught them, all this. And that's when I formed that task force. And I said, no, I didn't. I didn't let him out. And as he outlined all these things that weren't true that went on. And so I sent him a letter debunking all of that and the prosecutor's office. But then I said, look, we have a way to track these guys when they come into jail and put holders on them and so forth. And we can do that because they're high profile. And that's what I formed the task force for. And ICE was there. And I said to ICE, I said, look, you want me to honor these detainers. And all it is your guy out there in the field says, hey, I want a detainer on this guy. So I said, look, if you want me to detain somebody, there has to be a criteria, right? I have to know what it is I'm detaining that person for. And so we agreed that there are three things, right? So the detainer for someone who left the country and then re-entered, and now they have a court order to deport that person, all right? Someone who has committed a crime in another state, like murder, assault, something very serious, domestic violence, and now they've moved here, okay, and they get picked up for some reason, and ICE wants them for these other crimes they committed. And the third one was, oh, Mary Carol, you gotta help me out here. So I had three criteria.
Yeah,
So
one was known terrorist activity.
thank you, the terrorist. So the third one was if this person was a terrorist or tied to terrorist activity or the like. And they agreed to do that. And they had to I wanted them to change the form, and they said, well, we can't do that, but they will write it on there and they'll document it, what it is, so that I'm holding people who meet one of those three criteria. Those are the people that I will, keep incarcerated, et cetera, et cetera. And we're vetting that. I mean, that goes through our records department, who we've trained for that and so forth. And, over a year, and we had the numbers. So over 1 year period, all right, remember that we release and take in about 80 people a day. I mean, it's huge. Over the entire year of 2024, we had 70 undocumented people who were brought to our jail for different crimes. Many of them low-level crimes, right? Disorderly conduct, drunkenness, whatever that's classified as, driving without a license, things like that. Were brought into our jail. 70. That is such a small number. I mean, given what we're seeing overall in general. So we are holding the line, and ICE is doing exactly what they agreed to do with me for me to hold people for those three reasons.
Okay. Marty?
What was the first category that you described? Something about if somebody leaves the country and comes back? I
Yes.
hope there's more to it than just that.
Yeah, if they've left the country and they've been deported, and then they come back, that is and then they come back secretly, that is a violation. That's
Okay.
And they have a judge's order set to re-deport them. That's
Okay.
what it's an actual judge's order to do so.
Okay.
Okay. Have you had any challenges? If you've taken somebody on for being a terrorist, have you had challenges about that? I would assume there would be. What defines a terrorist, in other words?
Well, and I'm not, getting in. I don't have the capacity to run down the background of these guys, right? When they come in, they're coming in, ICE has an eye on them, and they have, documented certain things they've done, et cetera, laws they've violated. I really have to, I don't know that I could vet that myself. I certainly, if they say, hey, this person's a terrorist, and they've documented that for me, and that's written and it's there. I have no way of refuting that. I'm gonna,
Yeah, I didn't, I didn't mean to assume that you would, Charmaine.
Mhm,
I don't think that's your job necessarily. Another law enforcement
yeah,
agency has
right.
made this claim. It's a judge's job, I
Sure,
guess,
sure.
at that point,
Yeah.
what have you. Any other questions out here?
Charlie,
Yes,
Charlie, first of all, I'm so proud of you being our sheriff in Hamilton County. It's amazing.
Thank you.
I'm very interested in how you would characterize the current relationship and dynamics between Lincoln Heights and Evendale.
No, that's a good question.
Give me some insight about how that's going, because I'm out of the state over the winter,
Mhm,
and I
yeah,
heard on on NPR the national story and also on MSNBC about
mhm,
Lincoln Heights and folks, an armed guard essentially for the community.
right.
But I'm out of the loop on it. Just curious about how you would assess that relationship and maybe what role you are currently playing to help deal with that.
Right. Well, the role I'm playing right now is the role of a sheriff who patrols Lincoln Heights. And
Right. Yeah.
any complaints or any interaction with the deputies that control or patrol, I meant to say, patrol Lincoln Heights is, falls directly to our supervision. So one of the things I'm doing is I'm diving into that. I will say that, Evendale is its own jurisdiction. And I understand some people can't really wrap their head around why I'm not in charge of that, in charge of Evendale, but I'm not. Uh, and I always likened it to like, all of the 42 police agencies out here, they all have their own chief, their own, all of that sort of thing. So it would be very inappropriate for me to step into Evendale and really demand or do anything there as a law enforcement officer. But I tell you, but Evendale has a very strained relationship. And I think part of it began, I don't know, some years ago from what I'm hearing. But for this specific instance, the Lincoln Heights residents have been very displeased that they have not had Evendale chiefs or mayor or people who represent Evendale at any of the forums that they've had. So I did go to, with my deputies, my command staff, the original meeting that Monday after it happened. And wow, that was very heated. It was a very heated meeting. I understand people were very frustrated, upset, etc. So, you know, it really was a lot. It was a lot for law enforcement to take in, but that is exactly what we did. Then we had a subsequent meeting that lasted for 2 hours with some Lincoln Heights residents and people that represent some of the churches of faith and so forth there. And that was very spirited as well. And what we're doing now is and what I did is I did a number of press interviews. So I went out and I did a press conference with the media and I gave them everything we had, and talked about it and who was investigating and so forth. And then I've done meetings with a number of other organizations that wanted to know what we're doing, and namely the county commissioners. We went there and we answered questions, and we've spent a tremendous amount of time explaining why some of the things happened that happened. And I think Lincoln Heights is very frustrated with Evendale, but I do think that's going to eventually get worked out because Evendale has hired people to investigate. They hired a company to investigate what Evendale did or didn't do, and those results are going to come out. And I think we should have some faith in that, and let's see what it bears out. But yeah, there is some strife there, and we're trying to manage it. I have increased patrols. And here's the thing, you guys, and I've been saying this, nonstop. When our state legislators allow this open carry, and they did away with the concealed carry permits and the things that you have to do and apply for and the training, and we kept track of that. When you had a concealed carry permit, if you went out and committed a crime, I would get a notice. I'd get a notice, and it would outline that with your information, and we would suspend your permit to carry,
Mhm.
and that's real. That's right. We're going to take your gun because you did the wrong thing, and then it's going to get litigated. We'll figure out how it's going to happen. But, as long as these legislators are just turning it into the wild, wild west, it's incredibly frustrating. And it's why I'm so passionate about it, because it's putting everybody in danger. And I know Lincoln Heights, some of the people there, if not all, are very afraid. I mean, it makes people afraid when Nazis are knocking at your door, kind of thing, on that overpass. And they're open carrying firearms over there, which again, that's their right. They can do that, and that's what they're doing. And it certainly puts law enforcement in a bad situation.
Are they masked in
Yes,
Lincoln Heights? Okay.
yes, very much so. Yeah,
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
sure.
Right.
Great.
So Mary Carol and I have already spoken about this, so I'll, in full transparency, but I did watch the video on of the KKK folks or
Mhm.
whatever, human beings on the bridge. And then I
Yeah.
also watched your press conference. So
Sure.
two things that irritated me,
Mhm.
and I think maybe if you would address those, would at least
Sure.
I calmed down after Mary Carol explained it to me, was
Mhm.
that one was the U-Haul was on the bridge,
Yeah.
pointed the wrong direction. But my question to Mary Carol was, why couldn't you trace the people using the U-Haul information, like the license plate? And then
Right.
the second question I had was the officer from Evendale who helped the one member of the KKK rally get back to his Jeep with his dog. Why in
Mhm.
the hell was he helping him? Anyway, I'll shut up at
Mm.
that point.
Yeah, so let me answer first. We as police officers we're not allowed to identify people by running their plates, by getting information off their driver's license or anything like that, and running them through the system, because there's lots of ways you can run somebody. You can run them just to see what they've been convicted of. You can run them and get their address and phone number, and there's a lot of ways you can do that. And unfortunately, there are law enforcement people over the past decades that have misused that. And you could have officers run somebody just because they wanted to find out where some woman they pulled over lived, quite frankly. And or to, they've got a neighbor they don't like, and they're going to run the plates of the person who shows up in their driveway and that kind of craziness. We're not allowed to do that. That is an absolute felony. And, so unless someone commits a crime, then, and we have that bona fide real reason to run them and get their information, we cannot do that by law. So as much as we'd love to know and get licenses from those guys that were out there on that bridge, and we asked a guy for his license, he told us no. And guess what? He's allowed to do that. Do I agree with it? That's our state legislators that manage that kind of thing. But yeah, so we cannot just look people up just because. And they didn't, unfortunately, it feels like they broke a law, but they didn't break any laws, by demonstrating and being there, because they didn't need a permit, because they were on the sidewalk, etc. So, and as far as the Evendale deputy goes, I watched the video regarding his actions, and truthfully, the chief of Evendale needs to speak to that. you know, um, I I was told that, you know, and this is something that was made public from the Evendale chief, that this officer is just trying to get these guys out of town as quickly as possible. But you know, but that is something that early on was said, and that was said, in fact, at the county commission meeting when the chief was asked about it. That was what he said. So, other than that, you know, I can't comment, and I'll be watching, everyone will, for the investigation to come out on, you know, what's gone on.
Okay.
And Sheriff, I just wanted to add one thing. When you talked about the investigation, so the prosecutor or new prosecutor is also investigating everything from the sheriff's department. So
Correct.
it's all under investigate, you know, another set of eyes looking at
Yeah,
everything.
oh yes, I didn't mean to say we're not having investigations, because we are. We gave everything to the prosecutor's office, all of our body cam footage, everything we had. They reviewed it. They're waiting for the process in Evendale to be completed, but they sent us back all our body cam and our footage, so we released that to the public. We released it to the news and so forth. And in fact, there was an article today, I think, the media, WCPO, wrote an article regarding what our deputies did, and I thought it was pretty positive.
Who is investigating Evendale? You said that they were having
Yeah,
outside people investigate them?
they have a consulting firm that they hired, and the name escapes me, but it's a number of people who, you know, this isn't their first rodeo. They do this for a living. There's a number of people that will come in and investigate police departments. They have, in fact, one of the people that is their chief investigator is a former chief of Cincinnati Police, a very long-term guy that spent many years in the law enforcement field, and, you know, retired at a very high rank. So
Is it like, are they required to release the findings from the investigation, or can they just bury them once they get the
no,
results?
they'll be required to release that, because that, you know, well, that's what they told the public. You know, they came to the county commission meeting and said, hey, we're gonna, you know, we're gonna get this company, we're hiring them. They even put the amount, or let's see, yeah, I mean, they put the amount down that they were gonna hire them for. I think it was 70,000. And then they had 90 days to get this completed. So, oh yes, I fully expect the results will be public.
Excuse me, I missed, who is it that hired them? Was it Lincoln Heights or?
No, it was Evendale
Even-
Police Department.
Oh,
Their
okay.
mayor and council there decided to hire an independent
Oh, okay,
group
Okay.
to study their
Yeah.
actions.
okay, understand. And Eileen, it looks like you have your hand up. Eileen? No, I guess she didn't.
No, it's fine. Yeah, I do not have my hand up. I don't know what happened there.
Alrighty. Any other questions there? At all? I just have one last quick question. Is something I've forgotten.
Mhm.
In the last legislature, there was a pistol grip law that they were looking at passing, and I think it had went through a number of sessions, uh, had a number of meetings related to it. It might have been one of Gene Smith's laws.
Okay.
I'm wondering if do you recall anything about what happened with that?
I'd have to have the House bill number, and
Okay,
you
all
know,
right. I don't
I don't
recall that.
recall anything specifically
Yeah.
about grips, but
Okay.
you might be talking about bump stocks. When they put bump stocks on a gun, a rifle, what it does is it makes it very much like an automatic, you know.
Mhm,
And And we want to outlaw those in Hamilton County, but the laws that were passed at the state level prohibit us from doing that.
Okay. Now, the one I was thinking of, I'm sure it had to do with pistol grips, which essentially do the same thing, only with a pistol.
Oh, yeah, you can, yeah, there's all manner of fancy things you can put to a firearm, so I don't doubt it.
Yeah. Yeah, unbelievable.
Mhm.
All right, if we don't have any other questions, we're gonna let Charmaine go a little early here tonight.
Great. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Charmaine.
Thank you so
Thank
Thank
much.
you
very
guys
much.
very
Thanks, Mary
much. I
Carol.
super
Good to see
appreciate it. Thank you all.
everybody.
Thank
We
you.